Hello and welcome to my channel Mains Gains. My name is Christian Quartermain and I am a student dietitian studying a master's degree at the University of Nottingham in dietetics and nutrition. Alongside this, I am also a qualified personal trainer. If you are new here, it's great to have you here. Welcome to the channel. If you enjoy the video, I would really appreciate a like, and if you want to see more content of this kind, please subscribe so you get notified when future videos are uploaded. I would like to wish you all a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. I'm hoping a lot of your New Year's resolutions are that you want to get into good shape and you're looking for some tips and advice on how to do so. You've come to the right place. These videos that I'm bringing you are regarding the most up-to-date nutrition information and the most up-to-date workouts and workout plans, tips, advice, etc., etc. With that all said, let's jump into today's video. And of course, we are continuing with the series of Metabolic Mondays. And in this specific series of Metabolic Mondays, we have been looking at key organs in energy metabolism. And specifically today, we are now moving on to skeletal muscle, part 1. And the contents in today's video is structured exactly the same as the previous videos to keep everything similar and familiar to yourselves. The first point we will be looking at is what and where is skeletal muscle situated on the body. Following this, we will be looking at skeletal muscle's role in the metabolism. That will be part 1 of the video. Then the following week, in part 2, we will be looking at the impact this has on your body utilizing substrates, so what skeletal muscle's impact has on your body then utilizing food, nutrients, etc. And finally, once we've gathered all this information, I will give you some direct approaches to how you can apply this information to your fitness goals. Now, let's get into the first slide. What and where is skeletal muscle? Skeletal muscle makes up over 30% of your body's total mass. It's found all across your body. And it's generalized as the muscle type that connects to bone from tendons and allows for types of movement. So examples of these would be your bicep muscles, your pectoral muscles, your hamstrings, your quadriceps. It's any muscle used voluntarily. That's what is skeletal muscle. However, it's not only limited to those muscle groups. You can also think of muscles in your mouth when you're chewing, or the muscles in your chest that help it expand when you inhale, or the muscles in your back that keep it up straight, that help with your posture. These are all skeletal muscles. Each muscle contains flexible fibers that allow for this type of voluntary contraction. There are 2 other types of muscle groups, and they are smooth muscle, and smooth muscle are the muscles that contract involuntarily. So an example of this would be your bladder, for example. You can't, once you need to go to the toilet, you need to go to the toilet. And the other one is cardiac muscle, which is pretty similar to smooth muscle tissue. It's an involuntary muscle that contracts without you having to think about it. The difference between cardiac muscle and smooth muscle tissue is the cardiac muscle tissue is around your heart, and that is constant. It will continuously beat, and that is the distinction there between cardiac and smooth. Skeletal muscle's role in metabolism. Skeletal muscle uses the most energy out of all the organs. Of course it does. If you think about it like this, if you imagine all the movement that you make throughout the day, all the intricate muscle fibers and the contractions they generate, your body, your skeletal muscle is doing a lot of work. It makes up 30% of your body's total mass. So that's a lot, relatively speaking. Whether you're doing some hobbies, or you're at work, doing chores around the house, shopping, or even working out at the gym, your body is contracting continuously throughout these movements, and therefore it requires a lot of energy and uses the most energy. On a separate note, if you look at the nervous system, that also uses quite a significant amount of energy because the nervous system has to send signals to the muscles to tell them to contract. So complex exercises can be quite good for burning calories. If you look at a burpee in particular, if you think about all the muscle groups that you are using to generate a burpee, you go down into a squat, so you're using your quadriceps. You then jump back, so you're using your quadriceps and hamstrings. When you're in that plank position, you're bringing in your shoulder muscles, the front deltoids, you're bringing in the abdominals to keep you held there. Then you can add a press up, so you do the press up, that's using your pectorals, it's using your triceps, and then when you come back in, you're jumping again back in, and then you're jumping up, you're using the calves, if you do a little jump, a little bunny hop at the top. So that's a lot of muscle groups being worked at once. And then on top of that, your nervous system has to send so many different signals rapidly to all these different muscle groups to contract at once. And that's why complex exercises are good for burning calories. So let's say you did like burpees for a minute, you're going to burn quite a lot of calories in that minute. The only problem with complex exercise like burpees is they're very fatiguing. So although they are good in a certain amount of time for burning calories, so the amount of calories they burn in a minute, they aren't very good in terms of sustainability. So pros and cons. I like burpees. I know they're a tough exercise. If I was doing circuit training or hits, I would add them in there, but you've got to be aware that they are not a sustainable exercise, so you need to mix it up with other exercises. Skeletal muscle is also the biggest store of glycogen, brackets carbohydrate. I've spoken about this in previous videos, that when we eat a carbohydrate meal, it is digested in our stomachs and further digested in our intestines, and it's broken down into glucose, and we store that glucose either in our liver or in our skeletal muscle as glycogen. And the reason it's important that we do this is because glycogen, when it is used, it is converted back into glucose, and that glucose is broken down into ATP. And ATP is an energy molecule that is what is responsible for us generating movements, not only in our voluntary skeletal muscle, but in our smooth muscle tissue and in our cardiac muscle tissue. ATP is responsible for those contractions. And glucose, when we break one molecule of glucose down into ATP, it creates a lot of ATP molecules relative to something like a molecule of fat. Glucose is our most efficient fuel source in creating ATP, and for us to then use ATP to contract our muscles. Skeletal muscle is also a major store of protein as an energy source. Our muscles are made of protein. The muscle fibers, they're made of amino acids. That's why we consume protein, so that we can, that dietary protein can then be added to the muscles that we're stimulating to make them bigger. It can also be used as an energy source. So when our body's going through catabolic processes, so when we are maybe fasting, so we haven't eaten for a while, our body will kind of dip into our protein a little bit and use it as an energy source if it feels that it's not necessary to keep the protein. That's why it's suggested to have multiple protein-based meals a day, so that our body doesn't keep going into this catabolic process and remains in an anabolic process, because as catabolic processes are where things break down, whereas anabolic processes are where things are built up. The other thing with protein as well is that when we do go in a fasted state, if we don't eat, eventually we go into a starved state. So once we've gone through our glucose and gone through all of our fat stores, we will then go into our protein. And if we start eating into our protein and a lot of it as a fuel source, we would die, we would starve to death. And finally, skeletal muscle is adaptable in what energy substrate it can use, brackets carbs, fat and protein. So this is just elaborating further on what I've said. We predominantly use carbohydrate as our fuel source. Once that starts depleting, we will move on to fat depending on the intensity of our exercise. If it is high intensity, well, max high intensity, we will use solely carbohydrate. We cannot use fat. It cannot be broken down because fat needs oxygen to react with to be broken down into ATP, whereas carbohydrate can be broken down without oxygen into ATP. So if you're doing HIIT, you will only use carbohydrate. Fat can be used when it's more aerobic exercise, running, swimming, cycling, walking, sitting. Obviously, when I'm saying sitting, I mean if you haven't eaten in a while, then you'd start breaking down fat. And protein, reiterating what I said, you will break a bit of protein down if you're going through catabolic processes and your muscles don't feel it's necessary to keep that protein. And you will also break down protein much more rapidly and a lot more if you are in a starved state where you haven't eaten in a very long time and your body has run out of other substrates to use as an energy source. And that concludes today's video on skeletal muscles' relationship with energy metabolism, part 1. I hope you enjoyed the content of today's video and learned something, hopefully something you can apply to your own lifestyle. And if you did enjoy this video, I would really appreciate a like, as I mentioned at the beginning. And if you want to be notified when part 2 of this content is released, hit the subscribe button. With that said, take care, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye-bye.